Many people struggle in dating not because they're unlovable, naive, or emotionally weak, but because they're trapped in experiences they cannot clearly define. They know something feels wrong, but nothing feels clearly wrong. They're not being cheated on, they're not being insulted, they're not being rejected, yet they feel anxious, they feel insecure, they feel stuck. This emotional state is deeply confusing because humans are taught to associate pain with obvious harm. Breadcrumbing doesn't create obvious harm. It creates emotional suspension. You are kept in a state of almost, and that almost keeps people emotionally stuck longer than heartbreak ever could. If you've ever felt deeply attached to someone who never fully chose you, yet never fully left, this video will finally explain why. And later in this video, I'll explain why breadcrumbers often panic the moment you emotionally pull away. A reaction most people completely misinterpret and one that keeps them stuck far longer than necessary. Once you understand that moment, relapse becomes almost impossible. Most people believe emotional pain comes from obvious loss, a breakup, a betrayal, a clear no. But breadcrumbing doesn't feel like loss. It feels like suspension. You're not grieving, you're waiting. Waiting for replies, waiting for clarity, waiting for something to finally start. Your nervous system stays alert. Your mind stays engaged. Your emotions stay unresolved. And because nothing is clearly wrong, you stay. This is not weakness, it's psychology. What breadcrumbing actually is. Breadcrumbing is a relational pattern where one person provides intermittent emotional reinforcement to maintain another person's emotional investment without offering consistency, clarity, or commitment. This definition matters because breadcrumbing is not about confusion, shyness, taking things slow. Breadcrumbing is about access without responsibility. Whether conscious or unconscious, it functions the same way. Connection is given selectively. Clarity is delayed indefinitely. Hope is rationed. The person breadcrumbing controls when connection happens, how deep it goes, and how unclear it remains. And that control keeps the other person emotionally invested. Why breadcrumbing doesn't feel like rejection. Rejection hurts, but it ends. Breadcrumbing keeps the emotional system open. Your brain doesn't register a loss, so it never initiates closure. Instead, it stays alert. This is why people say, "I don't know why I can't move on. There wasn't even a real relationship. Why does this still affect me?" Breadcrumbing creates attachment without resolution. An unresolved attachment quietly drains emotional energy over time. The brain science that makes this addictive. Here's the part that removes shame. Your brain is wired to chase unpredictable rewards. Predictable affection creates calm. Unpredictable affection creates obsession. This is the same neurological mechanism used in gambling, social media, notification systems. When attention is inconsistent, dopamine spikes higher, emotional memory strengthens, attachment deepens. Your brain learns, uncertainty means importance. This isn't romance, it's conditioning. Breadcrumbing conditions you to associate emotional relief with the same person creating emotional stress. Why smart, empathetic people are most vulnerable. Breadcrumbing does not primarily trap insecure people. It traps empathetic people, patient people, reflective people, people who try to understand instead of react. These individuals fill in gaps. They interpret silence generously. They rationalize inconsistency. They search for explanations instead of drawing boundaries. Breadcrumbing feeds on interpretation. The more you try to understand, the longer you stay. The role of hope, the invisible leash. Breadcrumbing doesn't eliminate hope. It rations it, enough hope to keep you invested, not enough clarity to let you feel safe. Hope becomes a leash. You don't stay because of what is. You stay because of what might be. And possibility has no expiration date. The intense beginning, why memory traps you. Most breadcrumbing starts with intensity. Fast replies, deep conversations, early emotional closeness. This phase matters because it creates contrast. Once your nervous system experiences connection at that level, later inconsistency feels like loss, even though nothing was ever secured. Breadcrumbing relies on emotional memory, not present behavior. When the energy drops, something subtle happens. You stop observing their behavior. You start monitoring yourself, your tone, your timing, your needs. Breadcrumbing redirects attention inward. One person controls the dynamic. The other self-corrects endlessly. The crumb, why one message feels so big. Just when you begin emotionally detaching, it happens. A message, a call, a reminder you still matter. Not clarity, not progress, just presence. The crumb isn't powerful because of what it says. It's powerful because of when it arrives. It resets hope, and the cycle continues. One of the most dangerous misunderstandings about breadcrumbing is the belief that time will fix it. People assume, if I'm patient, it will grow. If I don't pressure them, they'll choose me. If they wanted me before, they'll come back fully. But breadcrumbing is not a phase. It is a stable system. The person breadcrumbing is already receiving emotional attention, validation, availability, reassurance. Without giving, consistency, clarity, commitment. From their perspective, nothing is broken, so there is no internal motivation for the situation to evolve. This is why breadcrumbing can last indefinitely. Months turn into years not because progress is slow, but because progress was never part of the design. The cycle only ends when participation ends. Gaslighting, how reality gets quietly distorted. Gaslighting and breadcrumbing is rarely dramatic. It doesn't look like yelling or insults. It looks like calm dismissal. You say, I feel ignored. They say, you're reading too much into it. What just happened? Your emotional experience was not discussed. It was invalidated. Over time, this trains you to doubt your instincts, your emotional reactions, your sense of reality. You stop asking, is this acceptable? And start asking, am I asking too much? This is perception control. Once someone controls how you interpret your own feelings, they don't need to control your behavior. You will regulate yourself. Future faking, tomorrow as payment. Future faking is not about lying outright. It is about talking about outcomes without engaging in processes. Someone says, we'll travel together someday. I can see myself committing eventually. You're exactly what I want in the future. But notice what never follows. Concrete plans, timelines, behavioral shifts. The future is used as emotional currency. You stay because you're emotionally invested in an imagined version of the relationship, not the real one. Future faking works because the human brain responds to imagined experiences almost as strongly as real ones. You don't need progress if you have hope. And that is exactly the trap. Victim framing and moral pressure. Victim framing introduces moral pressure into the dynamic. They emphasize past heartbreak, fear of commitment, emotional wounds. You begin to feel that wanting clarity is insensitive, wanting consistency is selfish, wanting reciprocity is demanding. So you reduce yourself. You accept less to prove your understanding. But here's the truth most people miss. Healthy relationships do not require you to suffer to demonstrate empathy. When your needs are framed as burdens, the relationship has already become unsafe. The myth of closure. Many people believe they need closure to move on, an explanation, an apology, an admission. But closure does not come from answers. It comes from acceptance of evidence. If someone consistently avoids clarity, that avoidance is the answer. Waiting for closure from someone who benefits from ambiguity keeps you psychologically tethered. You don't need their clarity. You need to stop outsourcing your self-respect. Action over words, a practical discipline. This isn't a cliche. Believe actions, not words, sounds simple, but it's a discipline. Words are easy because they cost nothing. Actions are expensive because they require consistency, planning, and sacrifice. Breadcrumbing thrives in language. Sweet messages, emotional statements, vague promises. But when you track behavior over time, the truth becomes obvious. Consistency is not accidental, neither is inconsistency. Once you observe patterns instead of moments, confusion collapses. Standards versus ultimatums. Ultimatums try to control others. Standards control your participation. An ultimatum says, change or else. A standard says, this is what I participate in. Standards are not threats, they are filters. When you state a standard, you are not asking someone to become different. You are deciding whether this dynamic fits your life. This is why standards feel calm and ultimatums feel desperate. One is rooted in self-respect. The other is rooted in fear. What happens when you detach? Detachment reveals truth. When you stop overgiving, some people vanish. Some escalate briefly. Some attempt guilt or emotional bargaining. These reactions are not accidents. They reveal whether your value was intrinsic or merely convenient. Very few breadcrumbing dynamics transform into healthy relationships after boundaries are enforced. But clarity always emerges, and clarity is freedom. Here's what most people never realize. Breadcrumbing relies on your anticipation. When you emotionally detach, you disrupt the system. Suddenly, interest increases, messages become urgent, emotional confessions appear. This is not growth, it's loss of control. The system only works when you are emotionally available without demands. When that availability disappears, the person reacts, not transforms. Understanding this prevents relapse. Potential, the most dangerous fantasy in dating. Potential is seductive because it feels hopeful, generous, and optimistic. But potential is not neutral. It allows present neglect to be justified by imagined futures. You fall in love with who they could be, who they almost are, who they promise to become. But relationships are lived in reality, not imagination, not intention, not future versions. Potential keeps you loyal to a version of someone that does not exist. Behavior is the only thing that loves you back. Breadcrumbing feels exciting because it activates anxiety. Healthy love feels calm because it activates safety. Many people confuse nervous system activation with attraction. Choosing peace ends the cycle. If this video gave language to something you felt but couldn't explain, pause for a moment. That clarity isn't random. It means your intuition was already right, you just didn't have the framework yet. If you're choosing clarity over confusion, comment, I choose clarity. Subscribe if you want content that helps you see patterns before they cost you peace. And share this with someone who keeps asking, why does this feel so hard? Love should not feel like suspense. It should feel steady. And once you know that, everything changes.